In a world full of convoluted tales, my history remains a twisted enigma. I served the US government, not as one of those suited men hiding behind thick glasses and a wall of paperwork. No, I was out there, in the field, treading on grounds that most wouldn't dare to tread on. The secretive branches I operated under, the codes I lived by, I won't divulge those details. Not because they're classified, but because they'll only serve to darken the skies of the storm I'm about to recount. Between my public job and the memories I'm narrating, I served as a covert agent for the government. This wasn't a regular 9-to-5 desk job. It was a world of whispered conversations in dimly lit alleyways, encrypted messages, and shadows that often seemed to dance of their own accord. The risk was perpetual, every new dawn uncertain, and every mission could have been my last. The weight of national security often lay heavy on my shoulders, and the secrets I've seen and heard are things of nightmares, things I can never unsee. Trust me, there are parts of my past I'd rather keep buried. Yet a particular incident gnaws at my soul, demanding to be shared. Deep within the relentless expanses of the Sahara Desert, where the sun scorches and mirages taunt the weary, there exists a drilling rig, an out-of-place monstrosity that most have no inkling of, and those who do wish they never stumbled upon its haunted shadows. I was barely briefed about it when the higher-ups deemed me fit for a mission there. Whispers around said that this forsaken rig had caught the FBI's attention in 2013, following some inexplicable occurrences around its vicinity. Now, my team and I weren't called for some simple disturbances. Apparently, it was a hostage scenario. A few workers had gone rogue, their minds claimed by the arid desert's madness, holding others captive. At least that's the tale they spun us. But considering the confidentiality of the place, they made it clear. No outsiders, no excess baggage, and certainly no guarantees of safe return. Why would they need 36 men for a situation any competent SWAT team could handle? That should have been my first clue. Yet the shadowy affairs of the government had desensitized me over time. I boarded one of the 3 aircrafts assigned to us, recognizing only Lucas and Henderson among familiar and unfamiliar faces. Our sole purpose? Get in, get the job done, get out. Simple. Hours seemed like days as our journey dragged on, but what lay ahead was far from anything I'd ever seen or experienced. As our boots touched the desert sand, what awaited wasn't just a drilling rig, but an intimidating structure perilously perched on the precipice of a mammoth cliff. Henderson's sarcastic tone cut through my bewilderment. Makes perfect sense for a drilling rig, doesn't it? Upon closer inspection, it became clear that the rig's true mystery wasn't above ground. A vast underground network of stairs, ladders, and dark passages tunneled deep into the heart of the cliff. A plan was hastily formulated, a strategy to pierce the belly of this beast. We were set to descend into the unknown, clueless of the horrors that lay in wait. The space inside that rig was suffocatingly tight, as if the very walls and floors conspired to hold dark secrets, and it was clear that sending all 36 of us down in one go would be akin to fitting a square peg in a round hole. We were divided into trios of 12, our hierarchy reminiscent of a fallback strategy, one where each subsequent group served as the backup to the one before. My place was in the second, and truthfully, I was somewhat dismissive of the gravity of the situation at first. After all, in my mind, we were up against a bunch of disgruntled workers, armed perhaps with tools and makeshift weapons. Hardly a match for a unit from the first group, seasoned and weaponized. Lucas, embodying the nonchalance many of us felt, found a stash of beers in a neighboring cabin, and in a silent rebellion against our looming task, we drank, laughing off the tension while our supervisors were none the wiser. But like an abrupt, sobering splash of cold water, word came down 2 hours later. It was our turn. Confusion gave way to a heavy realization. The first team had met resistance they couldn't overcome. Doubts arose, like specters in our minds. Were we mere lambs to the slaughter? The numbing buzz from the beer suddenly felt like a necessary ally against encroaching panic. With a metallic groan that echoed our reluctant resignation, the entrance gate swung open at Fisher's behest. We stepped into a dim, cavernous reception, with dusty desks, unkempt files, and a looming vault-like door, all standing as silent sentinels to whatever lay beyond. Fisher keyed in an access code, and with a deep sigh, we were greeted by an abyss of darkness. Rifles were now our torches, revealing a seemingly never-ending descent, occasionally diverging into alternate routes, but our path remained singular. Downwards. Always downwards. It must have been around 20 minutes when the steps opened into a sprawling room, a bizarre fusion of a lab and control center. Monitors flickered, and instruments of unknown purpose sat strewn about, creating an eerie dance of shadows. Lights, a small luxury, alleviated my disquiet. The dark always had a way of getting under my skin. Yet our respite was brief. Fisher, ever the vigilant leader, pressed his ear against another door, straining to catch a hint of sound, but was met with an oppressive silence. Motioning us over, his whisper was filled with foreboding. Stay alert. Expect the unexpected. The creak of that door seemed deafening in the quiet, and the tableau that met our eyes was the very stuff of nightmares. Laid out before us was a macabre scene, our comrades from the first group, lifeless, strewn across the sterile white floor, each testament to an ungodly violence. The wounds they bore spoke of a firepower far beyond mere rig workers, cavernous bullet holes as if dealt by a .50 caliber weapon. The chilling realization hit. We were not facing ordinary men. Either our superiors had been grievously mistaken, or worse, they'd kept us in the dark. The cold weight of dread settled heavily upon us, especially as I saw Fisher, a man I'd seen face down countless dangers, wear an expression that mirrored the fear gnawing at my gut. He raised a silencing hand, forcing a stillness in our group that made every second stretch to an agonizing length. I couldn't fault him for our situation, even as I wished we'd never stepped foot in this forsaken place. Amidst the corpse-strewn hallway, each step felt like a grim march toward an unknown doom. Despite numerous branch corridors offering alternative paths, Fisher's unwavering focus drove us to a looming, rusted door, its importance accentuated by bold red letters. Inspection zone, maximum clearance required. Adjacent to it was a panel complete with a fingerprint scanner, the kind meant to keep out, not let in. We all held our collective breaths, waiting for Fisher's next move. After what seemed an interminable wait, Fisher, with a grim determination, approached the panel, punching in a sequence and offering his thumb. The door groaned, the metallic shriek announcing our entry, and before we could process it, blinding red lights flashed, and alarms screamed in cacophony. Then hell broke loose. From the dark beyond, a barrage of bullets rained down upon us. Shielded slightly by my position near the back, I managed to escape the initial onslaught. But in the fleeting moments before I turned to flee, I caught a glimpse of our attackers. They weren't just soldiers. They were otherworldly, clad in sleek, metallic exosuits that glinted with each precise move. Their weapons, unlike anything I'd seen, fired with uncanny precision and lethal intent. Driven by pure adrenaline and the echoing screams of my comrades, I dashed into the first side corridor, the labyrinthine twists and turns serving as my sanctuary from the relentless pursuit. The haunting symphony of gunfire soon faded, replaced only by my own labored breathing and pounding heart. As I paused momentarily, desperate to regain my bearings, a cold metallic grasp ensnared me, yanking me into a shadowed alcove. A silent prayer formed on my lips, anticipating my imminent end. But to my astonishment, the armored figure, one of the soldiers, deactivated his helmet, revealing a human face beneath. I studied the features, feeling an eerie sense of déjà vu. A light of recognition, or perhaps amusement, twinkled in his eyes, and a wry chuckle escaped him. Of all the faces to see, I never expected yours. My mind, overloaded with fear and confusion, babbled out a torrent of questions, but he silenced me with a gesture, a soft urgency in his voice. Listen, time is not on our side. What he unveiled then turned my world upside down. These soldiers hailed from a distant future, the year 2152 to be precise. Time travel, an absurd concept from sci-fi tales, was the grim reality we faced. They had been dispatched with a singular mission, to ensure no one ventured beyond the inspection zone. And why? Within its confines rested something primordial, an enigma older than time itself, and by our meddling, by digging into the very fabric of its resting place, we had unknowingly doomed our future. The weight of that revelation hit me hard, and as I tried to grasp the magnitude of our actions, I knew we were ensnared in a tale far more complex than any of us could have imagined. "Regrettably, you have," the soldier began, his voice laden with the weight of a tale too terrible to utter. He settled himself against a dilapidated wall, allowing the mask of the formidable warrior to slip for a brief moment. "But the blame isn't yours alone. We played our part in this dance of doom." He ran a metallic hand through his hair, weariness evident in his eyes. "The world you knew, it spiraled out of control after the entity was disturbed. Time travel became not just a pursuit of science, but a desperate scramble to right wrongs." He paused, reminiscing. "Our aim was simple. We needed to erase this event, wipe it clean from history. The first team was meant to be dispatched to the winter of 2014, right when the construction of the rig began. Nip the problem in the bud, so to speak." I stared at him in confusion. "But the rig construction, it began in August 2013, not 2014. The soldier looked up, a resigned expression on his face. "Exactly. We miscalculated. The technology was embryonic, flawed. Instead of 2014, they arrived in August 2013. Chills ran down my spine. A horrifying realization dawned upon me. So your arrival, your mission, it was the very thing that drew attention to this place in the first place?" He nodded somberly. "In an ironic twist of fate, our attempt to prevent the discovery of the entity ensured its discovery. An event we unintentionally triggered, perhaps seismic in nature, perhaps something else, alerted the authorities. And worse, their survival equipment landed miles away. They never even got to warn anyone. They perished in the desert, and their mission only hastened the events we so desperately wanted to prevent." "Predestination," I murmured, the idea of a self-fulfilling prophecy reeking of a bitter irony. The soldier sighed. "Exactly. Our intentions, however noble, set forth a chain of events leading us back here." Pushing my disbelief aside, I pressed, "So what nightmare did we unearth? What is it you're so keen to keep asleep?" His laughter was more of a pained bark. "We're not guarding that monstrosity for its sake. It's for ours. If it wakes of its own accord, there's little we can do. But if we are the reason for its awakening, the ramifications are catastrophic." My mind raced, trying to stitch together the pieces of this dire puzzle. "Then why now? Why return in 2018? We had to ensure our intervention came after the original discovery, to prevent further paradoxes. Unfortunately, the exact date remained elusive. And, well, here we are." His words weighed heavily on me. "And your mission now?" He met my gaze, a storm of emotions swirling in his eyes. "We neutralize any threat. It's a brutal strategy, but the stakes. The entire fate of humanity hangs in the balance. By the end of your year, you would have glimpsed the magnitude of what lay beneath, opting for restraint. But by then, the clock had already begun ticking." My heart hammered in my chest. "So what happened?" He inhaled deeply, as if mustering the strength to share a secret too ghastly to reveal. "The entity, it stirs slowly, and 124 years later it found an escape. A massive void you inadvertently created. It broke free, and the world was never the same." A chilling silence settled between us, the enormity of our shared knowledge pressing down, suffocating, as the weight of the past, present, and future converged in that forsaken corridor. "No time at all," he murmured, the urgency palpable. The suffocating atmosphere of the room grew tenser, and my mind raced. A question threatened to spill from my lips, but I hesitated, unsure if I really wanted the answer. "Why am I still alive?" I finally asked, staring into those hauntingly familiar eyes. The silence between us grew thicker, stretching out endlessly. Slowly he reached into the confines of his worn pocket, retrieving a faded photo. I took it, gasping as I saw my own face, older and with traces of gray, cradling a baby in my arms. The surroundings were unfamiliar, a paradoxical snapshot of a moment I had never lived. He watched me, amusement playing at the corners of his eyes. "Not everything was blamed on you," he said softly. "Though many bore the weight of shame for their ancestors' actions, our lineage never did. We knew of the burdens you bore, the orders you followed. You acted without the knowledge of the consequences." I looked back at Photo, struggling to comprehend. So you're my descendant? He smirked. In essence, yes. If I end you now, it unravels my existence. A touch selfish, perhaps, but survival is a potent motivator. Swallowing the lump in my throat, I asked, "So what's next for me?" "Find an exit," he began, a hint of sorrow in his tone. "There are stairwells that lead to the surface. When you emerge, you can try and recount our conversation, but your words will fall on deaf ears. The tale's too fantastical to be believed." His words rang with an undeniable truth, and my heart sank. He must have seen the despair written across my face because he chuckled, a touch of melancholy lacing the sound. "Hold on to hope. We've got a plan, and a few days is all we need." Before I could press further, his visor shimmered to life, masking his features. With one final glance, filled with a multitude of unspoken words, he advised, "Give up the cigarettes. Trust me on this." And then he disappeared into the dim corridor. Hours might have passed as I stood there, wrestling with the revelations, before I finally made my ascent. I tried to convey the events to my colleagues. Predictably, they stared, convinced of my insanity. In due time, I was flown back home, subjected to interrogations, and while I presented the photo as evidence, it was dismissed as the delusions of a strained mind. Now on a forced sabbatical, I grapple with reality. Each day, I question the soldier's motives, his truths, and the sincerity in his words. Was humanity's salvation genuinely within reach, or were we on an inevitable path to doom? The riddles of time and existence are complex, and perhaps it's best not to meddle in the arcane. It's a lesson I've learned all too well. The unknowns are vast, but one thing remains certain. I need to quit smoking.